TV. Oh no 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 no. Hey you want baby take you kine. Hey you want baby love it You want to say
Yes, big up Yard Wave family from Kingston to New York with Jamaican news with backbone. The wave is here. These are the original low down pan beachy stout. Take a listen, guys. Wave.
Euxoricide, the deliberate killing of a wife by her husband, is an extreme and irreversible endpoint of coercive control and patriarchal entitlement. In the coastal town of Port Antonio, Jamaica, Everton Beachy Stout MacDonald utilized his vast commercial wealth to build a formidable buffer against legal and social scrutiny, ensuring absolute dominance over his domestic sphere. 2,000 miles away, his son, Major Andre MacDonald, navigated an entirely different environment, embedded in the rigorous, highly structured echelon of the United States military in San Antonio, Texas. Between 2009 and 2020, these two men were responsible for the terminal domestic violence that claimed the lives of 3 women across these 2 distinct jurisdictions. Isolated domestic homicides are a tragic fixture of criminology. However, the sequential transmission of this specific, lethal methodology down a single family lineage, spanning international borders, is a statistical anomaly that demands forensic deconstruction. Major Andre MacDonald underwent intensive operational conditioning to become a highly specialized cyber warfare analyst for the United States Air Force. This creates a pressing investigative question. How does a deeply ingrained familial blueprint for violence survive and adapt when the perpetrator is transplanted into a rigid institution defined by discipline and logical conflict resolution? To structure our analysis, we will use this comparative forensic framework to track the distinct actions of the father and son side by side. As the columns highlight, we input specific variables: geographic transition, age disparity with victims, chosen execution methods, and disparate legal responses. By mapping these data points against a shared constant, the psychological requirement for absolute patriarchal dominance, we can expose the mechanics of how familial deviance operates, evades detection, and is ultimately captured by the justice system. The violence began in 2009 with Everton MacDonald's first wife, Merlene. Her highly targeted assassination in her own driveway established a baseline. Everton could order a lethal strike and completely evade penal consequences. 11 years later, Everton targeted his second wife, Tanya. The 33-year age gap between the 65-year-old businessman and his young wife introduced highly volatile dynamics of extreme jealousy and possessiveness into the relationship. Simultaneously in Texas, Andre's wife Andreen had achieved extraordinary professional success. As the founder and operator of Starlight Homes Assisted Living, she possessed massive financial independence and an unyielding, ambitious drive. Malignant narcissism provides the psychological blueprint. Forensically, this involves an obsession with absolute dominion and an inherent violent intolerance for a partner's autonomy. Andreen's massive financial success and independence directly threatened Andre's internalized requirement for dominance. Neither Everton nor Andre viewed these women as partners. When standard mechanisms of coercive control failed to subjugate their independence, the perpetrators reclassified their wives forensically as obstacles that required immediate eradication. How the father and son executed this violence diverges sharply. Everton exclusively utilized proxy violence, paying local enforcers and contract killers to coordinate the assassinations. Returning to our matrix, we see how Everton's financial assets functioned as a tangible barrier. By purchasing the violence, he insulated himself from the blood and trauma of the crime scenes, maintaining a calculating, sociopathic detachment from the act of murder. Major Andre MacDonald's military background as a cyber warfare analyst was similarly defined by remote, digital, and asymmetrical engagement. Yet the data shows a collapse of that distance. Andre's methodology was direct, intimate, kinetic violence that ended in Andreen's death through severe blunt force trauma. Despite his advanced institutional training, Andre lacked his father's cold detachment. Confronted with his wife's unyielding independence, his military discipline catastrophically failed, and he regressed to primal, messy violence. Following the lethal strikes, both men instinctively deployed the exact same forensic countermeasure, the immediate utilization of fire. During the 2020 execution of Tanya McDonald, Everton's proxies did not simply abandon her body. After violently slashing her throat, they trapped her inside a vehicle on a darkened public roadway and set it entirely ablaze. A year earlier in Texas, Andre executed a parallel strategy. Crime scene investigators searching the manicured backyard of his gated community discovered an irregular burn pile containing a single metal zipper from Andrine's clothing. Andre then escalated the concealment. He attempted to mask his wife's remaining skeletal fragments by grotesquely intermingling them with the bones of a deceased cow in a remote location. Forensic psychology identifies arson as a primary mechanism for total psychological eradication. Beyond the physical destruction of biological evidence, fire serves to purify the scene and systematically deny the victim's existence. Both men sought to obliterate their victims' physical legacies, attempting to reduce their identities to ash to maintain absolute narrative control over their disappearances. Bringing these perpetrators to justice required vastly different legal strategies. In Kingston, the Jamaican Major Investigation Division finally bypassed Everton's wealth shield by utilizing the modernized legal frameworks of the Plea Negotiations and Agreements Act. By securing insider testimony from the contracted killers, prosecutors successfully penetrated the conspiracy, resulting in a life sentence for Everton. The Texas judicial system faced a much different legal labyrinth, relying on a civilian jury's strict statutory interpretation of intent. This legal flowchart illustrates the concept of mens rea, or criminal intent. Andre's defense team successfully argued that the killing occurred during a spontaneous heat of passion, preventing the jury from reaching the strict premeditation threshold required for a murder conviction. The jury found him guilty of manslaughter. The judge levied the maximum allowable penalties for the killing and the corpse concealment, but statutory parole guidelines mean Andre becomes eligible for release in merely 7.5 years. Where the statutory confines of criminal law fell short, the civil justice system provided an alternative reckoning. A historic $210 million wrongful death verdict was levied against Andre, permanently stripping him of the financial empire generated by his victims' labor. Analyzing our completed comparative matrix solidifies a terrifying reality across all tracked variables. Pristine institutional conditioning, whether insulated corporate wealth or elite military training, is completely insufficient to overwrite foundational familial models of lethal domestic dominance. The McDonald cases demonstrate that extreme domestic violence is not constrained by physical geography or high socioeconomic status. When perpetrators view murder as an acceptable mechanism of control, civil society must aggressively utilize every available legal framework, from flipped accomplices to total financial ruin, to penalize and deter the pathology.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah, guys, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to another video. Yes, guys, the wave is here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate all my subscribers. We out, guys. Wave.
There you are, baby, love it, baby. You want to say, go on,